That's right, guys. I got so heated about animation that I'm actually making a video. Amazing. Now, it's pretty obvious that this isn't like the stuff I used to make, and that's because I don't have the time, energy, or motivation to make a huge, lavish video essay. I'm just gonna be spitting some opinions of mine over gameplay footage, so go ahead and tab over and listen to my stupid, stupid voice. A while back, when I still made reviews, I went to see Sherlock Gnomes with my sister. While I wasn't expecting much, I ended up having a decent time and came back home pleasantly surprised. I started writing a review of the film, but eventually lost the motivation and shelved it. While at the time I didn't have a conscious reason for it, looking back, I think I just sort of knew that my audience wouldn't find it interesting. If you were old enough to be looking up reviews on animated media at the time, then you were probably too old for Sherlock Gnomes. And so, imagine my surprise when, sometime later, YouTuber I Hate Everything released a video in his Best of the Worst series on Sherlock Gnomes. I was flabbergasted. Was there something in the movie I'd missed? I watched the review, but ended up just kind of annoyed. While there was some valid criticism, a lot of it just seemed like the movie bored him. I found this especially weird because he actually put the movie on his worst of list, when in an earlier video talking about a Bionicle movie, he concluded that while it wasn't perfect, it's perfectly fine kids media and didn't belong on the list. It seemed hypocritical to me, not because they were both kids movies, there can be bad kids movies, but because here was one movie he seemed willing to meet at its own level, and here's one that he just didn't. I understand that to some degree this is just a matter of taste, but I genuinely just couldn't see anything about Sherlock Gnomes that was so offensive that it belonged to be ranked among things like Manos the Hands of Fate and Oogie Loves. I was actually so annoyed by this that I wrote a whole rebuttal to his video. I spent like a day or two on it before I had this moment where I was like, hang on, is this really the cross you want to die on? I realized it really wasn't and just let it go, but since then I got a little more skeptical of the things IHE would say. Fast forward to now. Pixar released Luca, a movie which I ended up absolutely adoring. I do want to make it clear that I am a bit biased toward this movie. I really liked it. I recommended it to my mom, and that's when she said something that's been picking at my brain ever since. She revealed to me that she'd tried to watch it, but once she was about 30 minutes in, she figured she knew how the movie was going to go and shut it off. That kind of annoyed me, partially because I used to do the exact same thing. When I was in high school, I binged American Dragon, but every time the plot started going in a direction I could recognize, I rolled my eyes and skipped the episode and missed a shit ton of the plot, and I was like, wait, there's the skulls? Where did those come from? Oops, shouldn't have skipped those episodes. When I went back and actually watched them, it turned out they were perfectly fine, and I definitely would have just enjoyed them if I just watched them normally. And that's the thing that I've realized over time. A story is more than just what happens in it. It's the journey, not the destination, and even if you know where things are going, you can still enjoy it. I mean, most any film, you know the heroes will probably make it out in the end. The tension doesn't come from if they'll make it out, but how they'll make it. Obviously, there are plenty of exceptions to the rule, but personally, I think that a predictable story isn't a big deal as long as it's not something the characters in the story can predict. For example, I guess the end of Moana from the opening info dump, the fact that there's one big lady that went missing and a big lava lady that appeared in its place, whoa, that's weird, what could that mean? But from Moana's point of view, she'd never even seen Motunui or Big Lava Lady, so how would she know? She figured it out basically as soon as she saw Big Lava Lady too, so there were no issues there. Sometimes he can even work to a story's favor when a viewer can guess where it's going. If you're easily able to guess that the new buddy on the adventure will probably betray them, then that can create some tension because you're aware of danger that the main characters aren't. Anyway, a little later, an episode of the Sardonicast comes out, a podcast with Ralph the Movie Maker, YMS, and I Hate Everything. And in this episode, YMS talks about how he didn't like Luca at all because of how predictable he found it. He ended up giving it a 3 out of 10. To be fair, Adam YMS is notoriously strict with his ratings. He said that anything over a 5 out of 10 is good, leading to the meme where he talks about a pretty good movie but only gives it a 6 out of 10. But even with that context, a 3 out of 10 is unbelievably harsh. He's rated genuinely awful movies better than that. He rated Escape from Tomorrow a 7 out of 10, and that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. He rated Luca only 1 point higher than Cruella. The real kicker is that in his Old Boy review, he talked in depth about how a movie is more than a list of plot points. Now, in fairness, that was in a slightly different context. He wasn't saying this because Oldboy 2013 was predictable, but because it used all the same story beats as the original Oldboy, but was still a terrible movie. But even then, I do still think what he said applies. How a movie is about the care and craft put into it, and if you just go through the motions, then you're doing a bad job. That's why me and the homies hate Illumination so much. They're able to crank out cheap movies that make tons of money by using tons of shortcuts in the animation, such as excessive asset reuse, and spending most of their money on bankable celebrities and tired story beats that are occasionally just ripped whole cloth from other movies. But now we've hit a bit of a contradiction. What makes Illumination's use of common story beats tired, while a movie like Luca, which I won't argue, it is predictable, is still an amazing film? Well, there's a lot of things, but personally at the core of it, I believe that a good story, or at least a story someone cared about, has something to say. Illumination movies tend to go for shallow, just be yourself, or being nice is good, with no real exploration of these themes, and this is by design. If you say nothing, you don't run risk of challenging anybody, and thus can appeal to everyone. Luca, meanwhile, absolutely has something to say, and every detail of the film is geared toward exploring its themes. I could remove half the characters from Sing and lose nothing. I can't remove any characters from Luca without absolutely destroying the story. Except for maybe Luca's dad. Sorry, man. But this is where the problems begin for internet critics like YMS or I Hate Everything. There are plenty of animated films that appeal to kids and adults, and even adult animation at times, and even rarer adult animation that's good. But while I agree that animation is not a kid's medium, we can't ignore the fact that a lot of media geared towards kids is animated. And so I believe the problem is that because animation is in such a weird spot right now, a lot of these critics try to rate kids' media on the same level as adult media. Adult media does try to be a bit less predictable. After all, older audiences are going to have experienced plenty of stories by that point and can play on that context to create fun surprises, and it's cool when that happens. Kids' media tends to not do that. However, the fact of the matter is, while I don't think you should be dumbing down kids' media per se, I think kids can, should, and often do deal with heavy topics whether they want to or not. If you were to make a kids' movie like, say, Knives Out, where your expectations are constantly played with and used against you, a kid would hate it. It wouldn't make any sense to them, because a kid can't be expected to know when a trope is subverted if they've never been exposed to the trope in the first place. The Sardonicast was pretty clear that they did not consider Luca to be on the same level as Ratatouille, but Luca and Ratatouille are clearly made for different audiences. Yes, little kids like Ratatouille. I did when I was little. I mean, just look at how funny that rat is. But I didn't really understand the movie until I was older. Luca isn't meant to be like that. It's meant to be understood by younger kids because it has a message that's good to impart to younger kids. I get really annoyed when critics like this talk about how they won't give movies a free pass just because they're for kids, and they show this montage of sophisticated animated movies. And yes, I agree that we should be critical of media we show to our children, but they fail to acknowledge that films can be written with a certain audience in mind, not to pander to them, but because they want something to be shown to them, and I don't think that that's a fundamental flaw. Personally, I couldn't tell you if Luca is better than Ratatouille, and Ratatouille is one of my favorite films of all time, because I believe that these movies need to be rated on different scales. Just because a film doesn't have huge stakes or complex themes doesn't mean they're dumb or lazy. Luca has a huge amount of love put into it. It was the director's first time making a film, and he based large parts of it on his own childhood in Italy. Wow, Disney, imagine that! A director that actually comes from the culture that you're monetizing, that... Wow. Crazy. To be honest, I was able to tell even before I read reviews on the film, just from the care put into the detail. And the attention to detail isn't just in the location design. Pixar has gotten really good at making high-resolution environments, but this movie especially gives you more detail about the characters. When there's a lot of detail in something, especially animated media, that didn't really need to be there, but it's there anyway, some people will refer to it as bumping the lamp. This is a reference to a scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the animators put the extra effort to animate the shadows from a lamp that was bumped during a scene when they could have just done a take of the scene that'd be easier to animate. But personally, I'm more into something that I like to call quarter stacks. This is a reference to the 2007 TMNT, another movie with an insane amount of love put into it. Seriously, just put on the director's commentary and listen to this fucking nerd go off about how much he loves his team and he loves how much detail they put in the graffiti and and he loves all the plants, and they did all the plants. One background detail in the movie is a stack of quarters that the turtles keep on top of the payphone in their lair. You can only really see it in one scene, but they took the time to put that there. But unlike bumping the lamp, where the artists were just flexing for the sake of it, here's a detail that actually adds to the movie, making the lair feel more lived in and even saying a bit about the characters. Donatello could probably just build a new phone for everyone, but he's pretty busy and the payphone works, so whatever. A lot of Pixar movies nowadays, I feel, are dense with detail, but none that really say anything. Just artists flexing their skills to model and texture a nice-looking scene. But whenever I watch Luca, I notice more and more detail that adds even more to the environment and story. One of my favorite details is this one scene where Pasta Lady is explaining how the race works, and if you look at the broom she's waving around, you can see where she yanked out bristles to make her fake mustache. This is great, I love that. Or how, on a first watch, it seems like Luca is able to fix the gramophone right away, but on a rewatch, in the scene right before Alberto scares him, if you pay attention to Luca, you can see him poking and prodding at the gramophone, trying to figure out, and right about to put two and two together before he meets Alberto. When he saw the gramophone again, he probably didn't let Alberto finish explaining, specifically because he finally had the chance to finish what he'd started earlier. And those are just a few quarter stacks off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but I just can't see how a movie with that much care put into it is just a bunch of disposable cookie-cutter products. Dozens of artists work tirelessly to flesh out a world and story, and you don't like it just because it didn't subvert your expectations? I just can't agree with that mindset, and I think it's pretty unfair to judge a movie so harshly when it clearly wasn't made for you. I'm not saying just turn your brain off. The exact opposite, actually. I'm asking you to think about who the movie is for and judge it based on that instead of holding it to a standard it wasn't even trying to meet. That'd be like complaining to the waiter that your steak is terrible when you ordered a pizza. Like, no duh, it's not what you wanted. It's ridiculous that you expected it to be that. At some point, you just have to take into account that media is not invalidated just because you've grown too old for it. And see, this is why I also brought up Sherlock Gnomes. The reason I thought it was fine was because I also noticed a lot of quarter stacks in there. One of my favorites is one where the characters are talking to a large fat cat doll being held up by a bunch of smaller cat dolls. And if you pay attention, you can see on their faces that the little cats are visibly struggling to hold this guy up. There were also a ton of cute little references to various Sherlock Holmes stories, and a mystery that, while predictable for me, I can easily see a kid having fun trying to piece together the first time they watch it. Yes, the movie has flaws, and it is definitely not as good as Luca, but it's good at embracing what it is, a cute mystery story for young kids, and I think it's really dishonest to pretend like it was trying to be anything else. So yeah, I guess years later I really am going to bat for Sherlock Gnomes. Oops. I guess I'll end by saying I didn't write this because people said a mean thing about a movie I liked. Well, I mean, I guess I did, but it's more than that. As an animator myself and someone who cares deeply about animation, I totally get and share the frustration that the media isn't taken seriously. But that doesn't mean it's kind or fair to pick on other animated movies just for not being what you wanted out of them. It helps nobody, it's just needless vitriol for the sake of it. And if you really care about animation, then you should be going after the corporations that refuse to take the medium seriously, not the movies themselves just because they were made under those corporations. Yes, Disney spits out movies like it's nothing, but that doesn't mean they weren't still made by people. And if you condemn all of them, even the ones that really did put love into what they worked on, you're not being constructive, you're being reductive. And that's about it. Okay, bye. See you later.